Hey Living Springs, time for another episode of Thursday's Thoughtful Thought. If you've been tuning in and watching these, you're probably aware that we usually start with a dad joke. Well, I was talking to my wife this past week about dad jokes in general because she knows I like telling them. And she said to me, why don't you stop telling these terrible dad jokes and instead do something constructive like read a book? So I said to her, well, that's a novel idea. Anyway, seriously, this month we're doing a series on thinking. And I want to share with you a few thoughts this week on thinking before you accept something as truth that you've just read or heard, and thinking before you repost that story on social media. Social media is a powerful tool, we know that. It transformed the way we communicate, the way we exchange and share ideas and opinions, and even have debates. And there's a lot of really great benefits to it. But one of the beauties of social media, which is also one of its weaknesses and dangers, is that there's not a whole lot of rules. And because of that, it allows for the anonymity of users to scam and deceive people with false and misleading stories. So those stories can be spread over and over and reshared over and over again with really no accountability. So we need to be very thoughtful on how we are using social media. We don't need to shy away from it. I mean, it's a great platform. We don't need to shy away. Instead, we should embrace technology, embrace these platforms, but just engage them thoughtfully. Most of us use social media or engage with social media almost every single day in some way. So we need to be thoughtful of how we're using it. And just as importantly, how is it using us? So in other words, we need to be careful that we're not being manipulated by stories that we're reading on social media. So we need to think before we share or post or repost a story we've just read. Social media is a powerful tool. It really is. It's an amazingly powerful tool. But it's also a paradise for people that want to scam and spread false and misleading information. How many times have you seen a story or a post on Facebook that says that they'll give you something free and all you have to do is share with your friends or click on a link? If somebody on Facebook is telling you that Costco, McDonald's, or Starbucks or any other company is going to give you something free just for clicking on a link or sharing, it's probably not true. And then there's those emotional stories that show a picture of a child, a sick child, and it says that Facebook will donate $1 for every share or like to the child's medical treatment. If a post on Facebook claims that Facebook or any other company is going to donate money in exchange for your likes or shares, you're probably not dealing with a legitimate source. These are all scams to get you to click like or share on a post. And even if no money actually changes hands in connection with these posts, the sharing of them indirectly assists these scammers by driving followers and shares and likes to their social media pages. And that allows them to develop more platforms where they can develop fraud schemes. There was a study done in the US that said about 67% of American adults get at least some of their news from social media. And most of those stories are trying to sway your political opinion in one way or the other. And because of that, a lot of these stories are not complete stories and they have misleading information in them. And stories about the COVID-19 pandemic are no different. There's no exception. Along with the accurate information you're going to read on social media, you're also going to be reading false and misleading information about infection and death rates, efficacy of medications, the harms or benefits of wearing masks, the effects of shutdown. You're going to find all kinds of information on both sides of the story, good and bad. And because of the power of social media, there is the ability to spread quickly, worldwide, false and misleading information that can actually do harm. So we just need to be careful. Proverbs 18:17 says, there are two sides to every story. The first one to speak sounds true until you hear the other side and they set the record straight. And that is often the problem with stories we read on social media. You're only getting one side of the story, and quite often you're only getting part of that story. And if you don't have the true or complete story, what you're reading on social media is going to sound an awful lot like the truth. I am always skeptical about the accuracy and completeness of stories that I read on social media. And I want to be clear, not all the posts, in fact, most posts you're going to read they don't have malicious intent. but a lot of them do. So a good rule of thumb to follow is to pause and think before you retweet, before you post or repost or share anything on social media, especially if what you've read gives you an emotional reaction and you think, I've got to share with all my friends right away. That emotional hook is what they're counting on to get you to share or repost that information. So yes, use and enjoy social media. But my encouragement to you this week is to consider these 4 things before you do. Firstly, you've got to know that once you put something out there, it's out there for good. There's no taking it back. Secondly, give thoughtful consideration to the truth and accuracy and completeness of any story you've just read before you repost it. Third, give consideration to other people's feelings. And lastly, give prayerful consideration to the wisdom of sharing something you've just read and are unsure of the completeness or accuracy of that story. So in conclusion, I came across this saying the other day that is really good advice to use before you speak, but it's also really good advice to use before you post or repost something on social media. And it goes like this. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. At the first gate, ask, is it true? At the second gate, ask, is it necessary? And at the third gate, ask, is it kind? And if you can answer no to any one of those questions, I would give careful consideration before I post or repost that story you've just read. So please, just think before you accept something as truth that you've read or heard, and think before you repost it on social media. Thanks for listening.